The release of what is without a doubt one of the biggest games of the year in Borderlands 3 is just a few short days away, and in this video, I want to take a look at everything that you need to know about the game before it drops on September 13th. I know that there's been a little bit of controversy surrounding the game, everything that 2K's done, and whatever the case may be on that. However, in this video, I just want to focus fundamentally on the gameplay aspects of the game, all of the different characters, the background on the story, gameplay differences from previous titles, technical specifications, all that good stuff. Gonna try to keep it as concise as possible, but there's a lot to go over, so let's just get right into it. So starting things off with Borderlands 3, I want to talk a little bit about the background surrounding the game. It notes, at the hard edge of the galaxy lies a group of planets ruthlessly exploited by militarized corporations, brimming with loot and violence. This is your home, the Borderlands. Now a crazed cult known as the Children of the Vault has emerged and is spreading like an interstellar plague. Play solo or co-op as one of 4 unique Vault Hunters, score loads of loot, and save the galaxy from this fanatical threat. Of course, 4 different characters has been a paramount notion of Borderlands, and this game is going to feature 4 very different characters, so let's highlight those characters individually. First up, we have Mose, who is the gunner. Mose is a battle-hardened former army soldier who specializes in mechanized combat. She uses an action skill to digistruct and climb into her bipedal tank, Iron Bear, which has hardpoints suitable for mixing, matching, and mounting high-velocity railguns, rapid-firing miniguns, semi-automatic grenade launchers, flamethrowers, pneumatic fists, and homing rocket launchers. She's also got a wide variety of different skills, such as the passive ability like Tenacious Defense, Force Feedback, Phalanx Doctrine. Then you've got action skill augments like Shock Hammer, Close the Distance, Wild Swing, and Bare Fist. All of that and 48 skill points in total to be invested into. And that's the general information on most. Next up, probably my favorite, is the operative in Zane. Born into Pandora's notorious Flint family, Zane is a semi-retired corporate hitman who always has a gadget up his sleeve. His action skills include a Sentinel drone that flies around and attacks enemies with a machine gun and a deployable barrier shield. He's also got a digiclone that simultaneously distracts enemies and dishes out damage, and which Zane can teleport to switch places with. A lot of interesting gameplay elements with this one. You've got action skill augments like digital distribution and which one's real. You've got passive abilities like Supersonic Man, Old You, Pocket Full of Grenades, and Double Barrel, once again a totality of 48 skill points. Next up, we have Amara, who is the Siren. Gifted with powerful Siren abilities, Amara is a renowned champion of the people and bona fide badass. Using her action skills, she can phase slam the ground to damage nearby enemies and knock them into the air, phase grasp enemies in place with a giant ethereal fist, or even phase cast an astral projection of herself that deals damage to everything in its path. You've got action skills like Tandava, you've got Stillness of Mind, and you've got Soul Sap. I imagine that as the Siren, Amara is going to be a fan favorite among many. And lastly, another one that's going to be a fan favorite, honestly, you can make the notion that all of them are going to be fan favorites because they're so unique. We've got Flak. Flak is the Beastmaster, and he's a wandering robot who always brings one of their 3 loyal pets into battle to buff stats and attack enemies. Their action skills let them send forth dive bombing rack, teleport gamma burst irradiated pets through rifts, and even fade away to temporarily become invisible while moving faster and regenerating health. Some of the pets include Gunslinger Jabber and the Beefcake Jabber, and then you've also got the Jabber sidekick. So as a robot, I think Flak is going to be a pretty cool addition to the Borderlands army. And those are the 4 characters again: Mose, Zane, Amara, and Flak. Very distinct in their own right, and I think there's going to be someone for everyone. And one of the big elements of Borderlands 3 is that this game is going to be incredibly replayable, especially if you're playing solo and you don't see the other characters in action. They're so distinct that you'll want to go back and play through the game again as each specific characters. Even if you're playing with a couple of friends, you'll want to try out each character for yourself, and that's going to add another layer to the replayability. Okay, so those are the characters you're going to be playing as. Going back to the story, of course, there is a threat that you're going to have to go against, and you'll have to face a fanatical threat. The Calypso twins and Troy and Tyrene are ruthless new media cult leaders who have convinced the bandit clans of the Borderlands that they are gods and saviors. They consider the power of the vaults to be their birthright and are leading their weaponized worshippers, the Children of the Vault, on a crusade to claim it, and only you have the arsenal and allies to take them down. Of course, cooperative play is going to be a big element of the game, and you'll be able to team up with other Vault Hunters online or with 2-player split screen on console. So not 4-player split screen, but any kind of split screen is definitely appreciated. 2 players is enough enough for me, and if that keeps performance relatively intact, I am all on board with that. We've seen a lot of games recently, cooperative games at that, forego split screen entirely, so whenever a game announces that they have local split screen multiplayer, I'm always inclined to commend them for it, although I would just like to see more games included, but nonetheless, Borderlands 3 will at least have 2-player split screen. Your whole crew will be able to deal meaningful damage regardless of your respective character levels through the handy leveling system. You can even opt to play with loot instancing enabled, so each of you get your level appropriated weapon drops, so they're really trying to give elements to cater the experience exactly how you want to, and that's pretty cool. Obviously, the biggest element of Borderlands 3 is probably gonna be all of the weapons available. Lock, load, and loot. Those are the 3 imperative words with Borderlands 3. There are over 1 billion guns in Borderlands 3, and every fight is an opportunity to add to your arsenal. Some guns launch exploding saw blades, some never need to be reloaded, others grow legs and pursue enemies on foot when you throw them. Yes, some of these weapons are absolutely insane, but that adds to the charm of Borderlands 3. Borderlands is a franchise that's kind of built on insanity, and Borderlands 3 is doubling down on that. But with so many weapons, are you gonna have a little bit of trouble choosing? Rarity ratings and item scores make it easy to compare the power of your pickups at a glance, but you can also tell a lot about the weapon and its functionality based on its manufacturer. And there are a variety of different manufacturers that are going to be present within Borderlands 3. Okay, so that's some general information. How about some gameplay differences in Borderlands 3? And a lot of that obviously comes down to each individual gun. Borderlands is all about scoring progressively stronger weapons and laying waste to your enemies with them. These tools of destruction feel more satisfying and impactful than ever. In addition to damage numbers popping above enemies' heads, weapons now have convincing impact and feedback. A doomed bandit may go flying across the map from a shotgun blast before clamoring to his feet for more punishment. The clear punctuating sound design of each concussive blast is more satisfying and feeling more at home than ever. Obviously, that's not going to be huge for some people just reading about it, but you want these weapons to feel as satisfying as possible. You want them to have that reaction, and it seems like with Borderlands 3, Gearbox doubled down on that as well. Speaking of guns, there are bountiful and each one feels special. Wield a submachine gun that turns into a mini turret when you reload, a weapon that needs to be doused with water when it overheats. Hold the trigger to charge up an elemental, incendiary, or corrosive blast. These wonderful toys have personality and variety in spades. I think that word personality is really imperative to Borderlands as well. Borderlands in general is a game that oozes charm, oozes personality, and oozes that captivating, unique quality in every little turn. And again, Borderlands 3 has that as well. There's also secondary fire options. Many guns in Borderlands 3 feature an alternate fire. Press the down directional button that spices up combat. A scoped minigun clicks into a powerful sniper rifle. Swap between elemental attributes to freeze, then flame. Unleash a barrage of explosive rockets with your pistol of all things. There's a lot of depth to the weapons in Borderlands 3. Yes, when you have a billion weapons, there is going to be some crossover, but at the same time, there's going to be a level of depth that I think gamers are going to be satisfied with as a whole. It was also noted that movement is aimed to feel fluid and natural. Prepare for the best playing Borderlands game yet, and we're talking more than just weapon handling. Mantling up ledges feels liberating, and Gearbox uses it to great effect with thoughtful environmental puzzles. I know some of you guys are against puzzles in a game like this, but as long as it breaks up the experience, I think it's fine. You don't want an experience that's just constant shooting after shooting after shooting. I know theoretically and in your head you just want that action heavy experience, but at some point you do want something to break up the monotony a little bit, and it looks like Borderlands 3 has that as well. You've also got sliding that makes a dramatic series debut, so a lot of elements are being included, and of course, one element of Borderlands that has been imperative throughout the series history is humor. I mean, you look at Borderlands 1, 2, pre-sequel, even Tales of the Borderlands from Telltale, humor has been one of the most important elements of Borderlands. And that humor was a big focal point in Borderlands 3, so if you enjoyed that kind of humor from the previous titles, expect more of that in Borderlands 3 as well. And you're gonna have several varied and exotic locations. Running and gunning through the blasted landscape of Pandora is very lovely. New environments like Eden 6 really shake up the scenery. You've got destinations from deadly forests to treetop villages to high-tech facilities. There's a lot of variety in the actual areas that you're gonna go to in Borderlands 3, and hopefully that makes you more captivated into the world as well. Now, we went over a little bit of the story, we went over a little bit of the gameplay elements. What about its technical acumen? Because you have to remember, Borderlands 3, yes, we are, what, 6 years into this current generation? This is the first time a Borderlands game has been built ground up for the PlayStation 4 and current gen platforms as a whole. So unlike Borderlands 2 and Borderlands the pre-sequel, which were running on a heavily modified Unreal Engine 3, Borderlands 3 was built from the ground up using Epic's new Unreal Engine 4, and as always, they've customized UE4 to best fit the needs of Borderlands 3 and the team's workflow. And of course, with their being a variant of different consoles. You have the PS4 and then you have the PS4 Pro. By the way, this information is coming from Scott Velasquez on the PlayStation blog, online and social product owner for Borderlands 3. And he noted the PlayStation 4 is an amazing console, but the PS4 Pro, if you have that platform, takes things to another level and allows us to push the game further by running at higher resolutions and higher frame rates. This is great because hardware in previous console generations was static for the entire generation. Of course, that's something that was really shifted this generation, which as a developer was unfortunate because we always wanted to keep pushing the envelope further and further. Sony has done a great job this generation to make it easy on us as game developers. And Borderlands 3 is going to be supporting both 4K and HDR output, and in fact, we allow you to configure them individually, which means you could play the game in 1080p HDR if you really wanted. If you have a 1080p display, that'll work out pretty well as well. With 4K and HDR enabled, the game is said to look amazing. Everything from the weapon in your hands to enemies to the FX from combat look especially crisp and detailed in this mode. Nightfall is rendered in much darker blacks, and the killer skyboxes really pull you into the world that the team has built. If your display is capable, you want to play around with these settings for sure. And how about this? The game is going to feature different graphical and display modes for players to choose between. This is something I'm all on board with. PC, of course, you have a variety of different settings to tweak, but on consoles, most games usually lock you into one performance setting, although we've seen that shift in games. Games like God of War offer different settings, and in the case of Borderlands 3, that'll be available as well. You'll be able to choose between favorite resolution and favorite performance on the PS4 Pro specifically through a new setting called Graphics Preference. When favorite resolution is selected, we aim for the highest resolution possible, capping frame rate at 30 frames per second. In favorite performance mode, we increase the frame rate cap to 60 frames per second and render at 1080p. Now, obviously, the cap is increased at 60 FPS. That doesn't necessarily mean that the game is going to be at a locked 60 FPS, and in the case of playing at the highest resolution, that doesn't necessarily mean that the game's going to play at a locked 30 frames per second. If you're playing a game at 4K, stabilizing at a consistent 30 FPS is difficult at times. Sometimes you will see dips, and we've seen that with other games, and in the case of even running a game at a locked 60 FPS, it's rather difficult given that the PS4 Pro is what, a $400 console at the end of the day? It's just the reality we kind of have to live with at this point. One interesting note is that when favoring resolution on a TV that only supports 1080p, the game will super sample from the higher resolution using the console's hardware. Because of this, the 1080p output will look sharper in this mode than it normally would, again thanks to the power of the PS4 Pro. Alright, and that's generally speaking for the PlayStation 4 and PlayStation 4 Pro. Xbox One and Xbox One X are going to be similar. I do also want to note the PC version to you guys, for those of you guys that want to play the game on a gaming PC. Of course, one of the imperative narratives that has been attached to Borderlands 3 leading into the release on PC is the fact that it will see a timed Epic Game Store exclusivity, so be mindful of that. You will have to go to the Epic Game Store and buy the game on there until I believe it's April of 2020. They haven't really hashed out the specifics on when the game is going to be arriving to other digital platforms. I imagine that a lot of you PC guys would want to play the game on Steam. That's not going to be happening right away, so just be mindful of that. You have to go on EGS, and there's going to be no preload available for Borderlands 3, so that's a little bit of a bummer on PC. But I do also want to go over the system requirements so you guys are aware of what kind of hardware you're going to need to push the game. There's minimum and recommended specs. Minimum was noted for 1080p gaming, and you're going to require an AMD FX 8350 or an Intel Core i5 3570 for the CPU. Those are pretty old CPUs, so if you have a modern PC, chances are you have something a bit better. Memory, 6GB of RAM, graphics card, an AMD Radeon HD 7970 or an NVIDIA GeForce GTX 680 2GB. So that's pretty manageable as far as minimum requirements go, and again, that's for 1080p gaming. Recommended system requirements is for 1440p. That's going to require an AMD Ryzen 5 2600 or an Intel i7 4770, 16GB of RAM, which is kind of standard for these higher end games. As far as the GPU goes, you're going to need an AMD Radeon RX 590 or a GTX 1060 6GB, which is rather manageable, and I do believe there's a little bit of a disconnect compared from the 590 to the 1066 gig. So that is a little strange, and it was noted that the game is going to require 75GB of hard drive space. Exactly what kind of hardware you're going to need to run the game at 4K wasn't detailed, so if you're on a 4K display, you're looking to get 60 frames per second, you're going to need something pretty beefy, something like an RTX series GPU, maybe a 2070, 2080, something like that. And then they did go through all of the different advanced graphical settings that are available. You've got display stats, That includes showing FPS, CPU, GPU usage, things like that, anti-aliasing, fidelity, FX sharpening, camera motion blur, object motion blur, and then you've got graphics blur, texture streaming, anti-stropic filtering, material quality, shadows, draw distance, environmental texture detail, environment detail, terrain detail, foliage detail, character texture detail, ambient occlusion, volumetric fog, and then you have screen space reflections as well. And by the way, all of those are broken up into 4 different settings: low, medium, high, and ultra. In the case of AF, 2x, 4x, 8x, 16x, and in the case of volumetric fog and screen space reflection, you can do off, medium, high, and ultra. So a lot of options in terms of optimizing this game to your exact PC. A lot more than what we're getting on the PlayStation 4, but hopefully, as games like these come out, as settings are being more normalized on consoles, games eventually will follow up and feature PC-like settings on consoles as well. But that's something that'll hopefully drop in the future. And that's gonna conclude this video. Again, so much to go over in the video, and honestly, I probably haven't gone over every little detail that is available. Of course, some elements like DLC is gonna be present in the game. This is a game that's gonna evolve after its September 13th release, and by the way, the game does drop on September 13th. But that is going to conclude this video. Let us know all of your thoughts on Borderlands 3. Are you excited, or is this one you're going to skip on for the time being? Sound off with all of your thoughts in the comment section down below. Thank you for watching, and goodbye.